Belief. That curious, invisible scaffolding upon which your species, with such admirable and often baffling diligence, constructs its myriad realities. It's a force, isn't it? Powerful enough to move mountains, or at least to move large groups of humans to try and move mountains, which is often just as eventful. One observes its handiwork everywhere, in the grand, soaring cathedrals and the equally grand, soaring declarations of unshakable certainty that echo through your digital forums. It's in the quiet conviction that the sun will rise, a rather reliable belief, that one, for now, and in the fervent, passionate adherence to ideas that, from an outside perspective, might seem, well, let's just say, creatively assembled. For eons, I've watched this phenomenon, the sheer tenacity of human conviction. It's an architecture, you see, an intricate, often surprisingly robust design, sometimes elegant, sometimes looking like it was put together in a hurry with whatever bits and bobs were lying around. It shapes civilizations, inspires breathtaking acts of creation, and, with an almost symmetrical enthusiasm, instigates unfathomable destruction. A tool of immense power, wielded by minds that are, if you'll forgive the observation, still very much a work in progress. Consider the spectrum. The unwavering faith that launched armadas across oceans, convinced of divine sanction. The dogmatic adherence to scientific paradigms that, in their day, dismissed inconvenient new truths with a rather haughty sniff, only to be overturned by the next wave of equally fervent and eventually equally replaceable certainties. Think of the intricate self-sealing logic of conspiracy narratives that blossom in the fertile soil of modern anxieties, or the simple, profound trust one human might place in another, sometimes a beautiful testament to connection, sometimes a prelude to a rather awkward conversation later. The intensity, the sheer range of what humans will choose to believe, and believe fiercely, it's quite the spectacle. And so one is compelled to inquire, as I so often am when observing your species, what are the deep currents that sculpt these intricate edifices of conviction? Why do you cling so tenaciously to certain ideas, often in the stark absence of supporting evidence, or more curiously still, in direct, even passionate defiance of it? What is this need to believe? It's not a trivial question, is it? It's the background hum to much of human history. The patterns, if one looks across the grand sweep of your endeavors, are as consistent as they are perplexing. This conviction, this subjective sense that a belief is a valued part of who you are, it's tied up with the very strength of that belief. An idea becomes a possession, a badge of identity. And humans, as a rule, don't like their badges or their possessions tampered with. So, where does it all begin, this human compulsion to believe things, often with such enthusiasm? One doesn't simply wake up one morning with a fully formed conviction about, say, the optimal way to load a dishwasher, or the ultimate fate of the cosmos. No, the human mind, it seems, doesn't arrive as a pristine, empty hard drive, patiently awaiting the installation of pure, uncorrupted Truth OS. That would be far too neat, wouldn't it? It's more like a canvas that's already seen a bit of weather, perhaps a few stray scribbles from a previous tenant. It comes primed with certain predispositions. and the very first strokes of belief, the foundational layers of what will eventually become a rather crowded and colorful internal art gallery, are often applied by the hands of your caregivers and tinted by the specific and sometimes rather peculiar atmosphere of your immediate cultural surroundings. This initial shaping, this early daubing of cognitive paint is profound. It's the undercoat that influences every subsequent layer, whether those new layers try to blend in harmoniously or desperately attempt to paint over it with something entirely different. Your earliest beliefs, you see, are rarely the result of rigorous independent research and a double-blind study. They're more often absorbed, soaked up, almost by osmosis, from the very air you breathe in the nursery, the classroom, or from the flickering glow of whatever screen happens to be captivating your attention. Your cultural narratives, your myths and legends, your cherished folk tales, and of course, your ever-evolving contemporary societal scripts about what's cool, what's cringe, and what's utterly essential for a meaningful existence, these play a starring role. They provide the initial frameworks, the first, often rather dog-eared user manuals through which a young and frankly bewildered mind learns to interpret the sheer, overwhelming cacophony of life and try to make some sort of sense of it all. These narratives get passed down through generations, like slightly worn but treasured family recipes, from parents to children, who usually accept them with wide-eyed credulity, at least for a while. Amongst peers, where beliefs are traded and reinforced like the latest playground currency, and from those various figures of authority or charisma, teachers, media personalities, that one particularly opinionated relative who cornered you at a family gathering. They offer explanations for why things are the way they are, shaping your fundamental beliefs about the nature of reality, your designated slot within it, and the expected modes of behavior, if you wish to avoid undue social awkwardness or worse. Think of your religious stories, often the first grand narratives to tackle the big questions of morality, ethics, and what happens when the lights go out. Or your nationalistic stories, carefully polished and frequently recited, molding your ideas about identity, belonging, and why your particular patch of dirt is objectively superior to all other patches of dirt. Through these channels, societal norms, values, cherished prejudices, and those ever-present stereotypes are instilled, becoming the bedrock of your early convictions, both the ones you talk about and the ones that just hum quietly in the background, subtly influencing your choices. And let's not forget the power of early emotional experiences. Moments of intense joy, fear, comfort, or trauma. These don't just happen, they imprint. They attach a sticky emotional glue to associated ideas, making them remarkably resistant to later attempts at logical spring cleaning. This early scaffolding, drenched in feeling and cultural assumption, means that the mind is never truly a blank slate. It's already a busy construction site before you're even consciously aware you're holding a blueprint. Now, the mind itself isn't just a passive sponge soaking all this up. It comes with its own factory settings, its own peculiar set of operating instructions and, shall we say, built-in features. There's an innate yearning for coherence, it seems, a deep-seated desire to find patterns, to connect the dots, even if the dots are rather faint, randomly scattered, or in some cases, figments of a very active imagination. This cognitive architecture, with its inherent biases and preferred shortcuts, plays a starring role in how your beliefs first get off the ground. Consider your mental shortcuts, your heuristics.
These are the clever little tricks your mind uses to make quick judgments, prioritizing speed and efficiency, often at the expense of exhaustive, painstaking accuracy. Why spend a week meticulously analyzing every angle of a problem when a gut feeling and a vaguely relevant memory can get you to a good enough answer in seconds? The availability heuristic, for instance, is a classic. You judge how likely something is by how easily examples pop into your head. Just seen a dramatic movie about a shark attack? Suddenly, a paddle in a calm lake feels a tad more adventurous. Vivid, recent, or emotionally charged experiences get preferential treatment in your belief formation department. Then there's anchoring bias. Your mind, it seems, loves a good starting point. The first piece of information you encounter on a topic often acts as an anchor, heavily influencing all subsequent judgments, even if that first piece of info was, to put it mildly, a bit off. And let's not forget agent detection, your brain's charming tendency to see intention and personality everywhere. Not just in other humans, but in the weather, your misbehaving printer, the stock market's moody swings. This knack for seeing minds at work, likely an evolutionary hand-down for spotting friends, foes, or potential dinner, can easily lead to beliefs in superstitions, unseen forces, or the idea that the universe is personally invested in whether you find a good parking spot. Your brain is a master of simplification, using these biases as rules of thumb to navigate a complex world. Efficient? Often. Flawlessly accurate? Let's just say the jury is still out on that one.
It's a common observation. Beliefs are often felt into existence long before they're thought into it. There is an emotional resonance, a gut feeling, a deep internal hum that can precede or even entirely bypass any rigorous logical examination. Your powerful emotions, fear, love, comfort, anxiety, that warm glow of belonging, when these get tangled up with your early experiences or the information you encounter, they can forge beliefs that are incredibly deeply ingrained. And these beliefs are particularly stubborn, precisely because their foundations are more in your heart than in your head, more about feeling than about fact. Emotions, you see, can act as a very compelling form of internal evidence. They grab your attention. They highlight information that seems to support how you're feeling. And they can create a rather neat, self-confirming feedback loop. If you're feeling anxious, you'll be more likely to notice potential threats, which will make you feel more anxious, which will make you even more certain that the world is a dangerous place. It's a beautifully efficient system for reinforcing a particular emotional state and the beliefs that go with it. Strong feelings often send you on a quest for beliefs that justify them. And strongly held beliefs will send you searching for experiences that validate the emotions tied to them. It's a cozy little dance between what you feel and what you decide is true. This interplay shows just how profoundly your early emotional landscape can shape the bedrock of your convictions, often making them resistant to change unless the underlying feelings are also addressed. Trying to argue with an emotionally anchored belief using pure logic, it's like trying to bail out a sinking boat with a sieve. You'll be busy, but not terribly effective. And what's happening on a more mechanical level, inside that astonishingly complex 3-pound universe you carry between your ears? Well, all these early encounters, the stories you hear, the cognitive shortcuts you take, the emotional storms you weather, they don't just vanish.
They start to etch pathways in the developing brain. Through the marvel of neuroplasticity, your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on experience. Beliefs, from this neurophysiological perspective, aren't just wispy ideas. They are the result of specific neural processes, neurons firing in particular sequences, connections between them strengthening or weakening. These processes involve how you perceive information, how you assess its personal meaning, what does this mean for me, and how that in turn guides your decisions and actions. Often this wiring happens pre-linguistically, before you even have the words to articulate what you're coming to believe. Your scientists are beginning to map this intricate internal territory. They talk about specific brain regions like the medial frontal cortex and the right dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, playing key roles in how you form beliefs, how you evaluate them, and how you manage to keep them stable, even when the world outside is throwing all sorts of confusing data your way. It's like your brain has its own internal belief management department. And those early experiences, that initial learning, physically shape these neural connections. This means your first beliefs aren't just abstract concepts. They are, in a very real sense, physically encoded into the very structure of your brain. This creates a kind of path dependency. Later beliefs either have to build upon these already established neural superhighways, or they have to undertake the considerable cognitive and often emotional effort of hacking out entirely new routes through dense, unfamiliar neurological terrain. So, trying to change a deeply ingrained early belief, it's not just a matter of presenting a well-reasoned argument or a compelling new piece of evidence. It might actually require a more fundamental process of rewiring those foundational pathways. And the brain, one observes, develops a certain fondness for its well-worn grooves. They're efficient, they're familiar, they're comfortable. Even if, occasionally, they lead you to bump into the same old walls, time and time again.
So, a belief has taken root, found a nice comfy spot in the human psyche. Does it then sit quietly, open to reasoned debate and gentle updates? Oh, rarely. That would be far too sensible. No, once a belief moves in, the mind, with an ingenuity that truly is something to behold, starts building fortifications. We're talking moats, ramparts, the whole 9 yards. Often, this isn't about defending pristine logic, but about protecting comfort, ensuring consistency, or keeping that carefully polished self-image from getting scuffed. These internal defense systems, combined with those sticky emotional anchors and the brain's own love for familiar routines, make human convictions remarkably tenacious. Let's call it the Citadel of Conviction. Well guarded and not terribly fond of unexpected visitors bearing contradictory facts. Your mind, you see, really enjoys internal harmony. It likes all its little beliefs to be singing from the same hymn sheet, even if the tune is a bit questionable to an outside ear. This powerful drive to keep established beliefs intact, even when the universe is practically screaming contradictory evidence through a megaphone, is what your thinkers call belief perseverance, a wonderfully polite term for what often looks like sheer, unadulterated stubbornness. And it's propped up by a whole toolkit of clever psychological tricks that prioritize feeling good and consistent over being objectively, painstakingly accurate. You know that itchy, uncomfortable feeling you get when two of your thoughts are having a public argument in your head?
or when you do something that makes your own stated beliefs blush. That, my friends, is cognitive dissonance. "I am a paragon of environmental virtue," you declare, as you toss a plastic bottle into the general waste. Ouch! That little mental wince? Dissonance. Humans crave consistency. You like your internal stories to line up. So, when this clash happens, you're motivated to fix it, to reduce that unpleasant mental static. You could change your behavior, of course, or, and this is where the mind gets truly inventive, you can subtly tweak one of the beliefs, explain away the inconvenient action, or just decide that the clashing information isn't really that important after all. That plastic bottle was practically begging to be landfilled, you might tell yourself. Anything to restore that lovely, if sometimes illusory, internal peace. It's a bit like mental interior decorating, artfully rearranging the furniture of your mind until everything feels harmonious, even if the feng shui is objectively a disaster. Then we have the dynamic duo confirmation bias and motivated reasoning. Think of them as the ever-vigilant gatekeepers of your existing belief system. Confirmation bias is your mind's tendency to roll out the red carpet for any information that agrees with what you already think, while giving contradictory evidence the cold shoulder, or perhaps a very thorough and usually dismissive interrogation. It's like having a personal news filter that only shows you headlines you'll enjoy. Motivated reasoning is a bit more proactive. It's not just filtering, it's actively building a case for what you want to be true. Your mind becomes a rather skilled lawyer, cherry-picking evidence, finding expert witnesses who agree with you, naturally, and constructing elaborate arguments to defend its preferred conclusions. Often, this is less about finding truth and more about protecting your self-esteem, your group identity, or just the sheer comfort of being right. The verdict is in before the trial even begins. Now, belief perseverance is the main event, holding on to a belief even when it's been rather thoroughly debunked. And here's a truly delightful twist. Sometimes trying to correct someone's misinformation actually makes them believe it more strongly. This is the backfire effect. It's as if challenging a cherished belief feels like a personal attack. So the mind doesn't just defend, it counterattacks, digging in its heels and finding even more reasons, however creative, to stick with its original story. You try to put out a small fire with a gentle breeze of facts, and whoosh, it turns into an inferno of conviction. Humans, endlessly surprising. Finally, there's the sunk cost fallacy. You've invested so much in a belief, time, emotional energy, perhaps even public declarations. To admit it's wrong now? That would mean all that effort was wasted. And the human mind hates waste. So, rather than cut your losses, you double down. You throw more good mental money after bad, hoping to somehow make it all worthwhile. It's like continuing to climb a ladder you suspect is propped against the wrong wall simply because you've already climbed so high. The view might be terrible, but admitting you need to climb all the way down and start over, that's a tough pill to swallow. So you see, these psychological buttresses, dissonance reduction, confirmation bias, motivated reasoning, belief perseverance, and the sunk cost fallacy, they don't just protect beliefs. They build a fortress around them, making them remarkably resistant to siege.
Now, if an individual mind is a well-defended citadel of conviction, then society is the sprawling kingdom that surrounds it, constantly influencing its architecture, its supplies, and even the morale of its defenders. Beliefs, you see, are rarely hermit crabs, content in their solitary shells. They are social creatures. They are shaped, shared, and fiercely protected within the intricate web of human interaction. This social dimension isn't just a backdrop. It's an active, powerful force that helps build, maintain, and sometimes, rather dramatically, amplify what you hold to be true. Think about how beliefs first take hold. It's rarely through isolated, independent discovery. More often, they are woven into the very fabric of your upbringing, through what your scholars call cultural transmission. This is the grand, ongoing process by which beliefs, values, norms, and those charming little societal quirks are passed from one person to another, generation after generation. It happens when parents tell children stories, when peers share secrets and slang, when teachers impart knowledge, or what passes for it at the time, and when your ever-present media beams out its carefully crafted messages. And central to this transmission are your narratives. Humans are, at their core, storytelling animals. You make sense of the world not just through facts and figures, but through the stories you tell about it. Your myths of creation, your legends of heroes, your societal scripts about success and failure. These aren't just entertainment. They are powerful vehicles for belief. They embed assumptions about how the world works, what's right and wrong, who's in and who's out, often in ways that are emotionally gripping and easy to remember. A compelling story can lodge a belief in the mind far more effectively than a dry treatise. And because these narratives are shared, because they form the common currency of a culture, the beliefs they carry become part of a collective understanding, a shared reality that can be remarkably resistant to individual doubt. To question such a belief can feel like questioning the very story of your people, and that's a heavy lift. Now, fast forward to your current digital age. This social reinforcement of belief has found some rather potent new tools. Consider your echo chambers and filter bubbles. These are the curated corners of your online world, where, through your own choices or the subtle nudging of algorithms, you find yourselves surrounded by voices that largely agree with you. It's comfortable, isn't it? Reassuring, like a warm bath of validation. The problem, of course, is that when you only hear echoes of your own thoughts, those thoughts can start to sound like universal truths. Dissenting views are filtered out. Challenging evidence never makes it past the velvet rope. This doesn't just reinforce existing beliefs, it can actually make them more extreme, a phenomenon your researchers call belief polarization. And into this mix throw the enduring power of authority bias. Humans have a long history of deferring to those they perceive as experts, leaders, or simply very confident individuals. An authoritative voice can lend immense weight to a belief, making it seem more credible, more worthy of adoption, often without much critical scrutiny on your part. In an echo chamber, if the dominant voices, the perceived authorities within that group, all champion a particular belief, it becomes exponentially harder for an individual to question it. The social cost of dissent, of going against the group's approved narrative and its chosen leaders, can be very high indeed. So the belief gets stronger, not necessarily because it's more true, but because it's more socially convenient. This brings us to perhaps the most powerful social glue for belief: social identity. For many, perhaps most of you, what you believe isn't just about what you think is true about the world, it's about who you are. Your beliefs become badges of belonging, signals of allegiance to your tribe, your team, your political party,
your cultural group. We believe this, and they believe that. Your social identity theory helps explain this. You categorize yourselves into in-groups, the groups you belong to and identify with, and out-groups. And, rather predictably, you tend to favor your in-groups. Adopting the core beliefs of your in-group is a crucial part of being a member in good standing. It strengthens your sense of self, your self-esteem, your connection to others who share that identity. So what happens when one of these identity-defining beliefs is challenged? It's not just an abstract intellectual debate anymore. It feels like an attack on you, an attack on your group, an attack on your very sense of belonging. And the defenses go up, vigorously. To abandon such a belief isn't just to change your mind, it's to risk your social standing, your connections, perhaps even your sense of who you are. It's like being asked to take off your team jersey in the middle of the championship game and put on the rivals. Not a popular move. And so, this social fabric, woven from cultural stories, amplified in modern echo chambers, endorsed by authorities, and deeply stitched into your personal and group identities, creates an incredibly powerful ecosystem for belief. It's an environment where beliefs are not only born and nurtured, but are also fiercely protected, often with little regard for their objective correspondence to that ever-elusive thing you call reality. The need to belong, to be accepted, to be us rather than them, is a profound human driver, and it shapes what you believe and how stubbornly you believe it in ways you might not always consciously perceive.
Right. So we've seen how beliefs are born, how they're defended with surprising vigor, and how they get tangled up in your social lives. Now let's wade into the rather misty territory of truth, with a capital T, no less. A concept your species has been chasing with commendable, if sometimes comically misguided, enthusiasm for millennia. Your philosophers, bless their Socratic socks, have built entire careers wrestling with what it means for a belief to be not just something you think, but something that's justified, or even, dare we say it, actually true. But this grand intellectual quest, this attempt to pin down the unpinnable, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens against the backdrop of some very deep, very human yearnings. Yearnings that often care more about comfort and coherence than about cold, hard, verifiable facts. So what does it mean to know something, rather than just believe it really, really hard? Your epistemologists, the philosophers who specialize in the theory of knowledge, have been at this for a while. A classic idea, one that's been kicked around and patched up more times than a beloved old teddy bear, is that knowledge is something like justified true belief. Sounds straightforward, doesn't it? You have to believe it. It has to actually be true. That's a big one. And you need a good reason, a justification for believing it. But what counts as a good reason? There's the delightful philosophical can of worms. Some have argued for foundationalism, the idea that some beliefs are just obviously true, like bedrock. Maybe they come directly from your senses, like, that's a surprisingly large badger in my kitchen. Or from pure logic. All badgers are mammals, therefore this surprisingly large badger is a mammal. Other beliefs then get built on top of this solid foundation. Others prefer coherentism,
This view suggests a belief is justified if it fits nicely with all your other beliefs, like a perfectly placed piece in an infinitely complex jigsaw puzzle. It's not about one solid foundation, but about the whole web of your beliefs supporting each other. This badger belief fits with my belief that my kitchen door was, in fact, left ajar, and also with my belief that badgers are, on occasion, surprisingly large. It all hangs together. Now, these are valiant attempts to bring order to the often messy business of belief, to give you a set of rules for distinguishing solid knowledge from, say, wishful thinking, or what your neighbor Brenda reckons after reading something on the internet. But here's the kicker. These very systems for defining truth and justification are human inventions too. They change over time. They vary across cultures. They're debated with great passion by people who, one suspects, also have their own preferred sets of beliefs they'd rather like to see justified. It's a fascinating, recursive dance, humans trying to define truth, using minds that are already full of, well, stuff they believe to be true.
Now let's step away from the philosopher's study for a moment and consider something a bit more visceral. Why do you humans cling so tightly to your beliefs, even when logic is tapping impatiently on the window? Often, it's because those beliefs are doing some heavy emotional lifting. They're not just ideals, they're existential comfort blankets. Your species, bless its existentially anxious heart, has to grapple with some rather large and unsettling realities. You're going to die. You're fundamentally alone in your own consciousness. You have a bewildering amount of freedom, and thus responsibility. And the universe doesn't seem to come with an instruction manual or a clearly stated purpose. That's a lot to carry. Belief systems, whether religious, spiritual, political, or even just a deeply held personal philosophy, often act as crucial psychological anchors in this vast and sometimes terrifying sea of uncertainty. They can provide a sense of meaning when things feel meaningless, a sense of order when chaos looms, a sense of hope when despair beckons. Believing in a higher power, a grand plan, an afterlife, the inherent goodness of humanity, despite considerable evidence to the contrary at times, or even just the idea that everything happens for a reason, these can make the often harsh realities of existence feel more tolerable, more manageable, more significant. Thinkers who've stared into this existential abyss, like Yalom or Frankl, have shown how these beliefs can be powerful defenses against the dread of it all. If there's an ultimate rescuer, if you're personally special, if you have some grand purpose, then maybe the universe isn't so cold and indifferent after all. The comfort, the solace, the sheer psychological relief that these beliefs can provide is an incredibly powerful incentive to hold on to them, regardless of what the fact-checkers or the logicians might have to say. When a belief keeps you from falling apart, its empirical validity can start to feel like a rather secondary concern. The heart, as they say, wants what it wants. And often, what it wants is a story that makes life feel a bit less like a cosmic accident. So here we have this fascinating creature, the human, earnestly questing for truth, for certainty, for knowledge.
And yet this quest is undertaken with a mind that is, as we've seen, a veritable funhouse of cognitive biases, emotional attachments, and social programming. It's like trying to paint a perfectly accurate portrait of the universe using a brush made of your own eyelashes while riding a roller coaster in the dark. The dedication is truly something to behold. The results? Well, they vary. This very drive to create elaborate systems for understanding truth, your philosophies, your sciences, your intricate theological frameworks, isn't this in itself a profound expression of that deep human need for order, for meaning, for a sense that the universe isn't just a random, chaotic mess? You build these magnificent intellectual edifices, these cathedrals of reason, perhaps as much to reassure yourselves that the world can be known, that you can be the knowers, as for any purely objective pursuit of facts. And this perhaps brings us back to why beliefs, especially those that offer comfort or a sense of identity, are so incredibly sticky. Their tenacity might not always come from the strength of their logical foundations or the weight of empirical evidence supporting them. Often, it comes from the vital function they serve. They are the psychological load-bearing walls of your internal world. They are the social glue that binds your communities. To challenge them isn't just to propose an alternative idea. It's to suggest taking a sledgehammer to a structure that feels essential for survival, for sanity, for belonging. And most people, quite understandably, are not keen on having their load-bearing walls sledgehammered, especially if they're not entirely sure what, if anything, would be left standing in its place. A most human predicament, wouldn't you agree?
All right, let's rewind the clock, way back, before your fancy philosophies, before your sprawling societies, before even your earliest attempts to write any of this down. Let's consider the possibility that your very engines of belief, those intricate mental machines we've been dissecting, weren't primarily designed in some celestial workshop for the pure, unadulterated pursuit of truth. No, it's far more likely they were hammered out in the rather messy and often quite dangerous forge of ancestral survival. The human mind, with all its quirks and belief-forming habits, is, after all, an evolutionary product. And evolution, one observes, is a rather pragmatic, if not always elegant, engineer. It tends to favor what works for survival and reproduction, not necessarily what is objectively, philosophically true. Think about those cognitive biases we touched upon earlier, the tendency to see patterns everywhere, the reliance on mental shortcuts, the habit of jumping to conclusions. From a purely logical standpoint, these might look like flaws, like bugs in your mental software. But from an evolutionary perspective, they start to look a lot more like features. Adaptive heuristics, your scientists call them. Clever little tricks that helped your ancestors make quick decisions in a world where hesitating could get you eaten. Imagine you're an early human. Information is scarce, dangers are plentiful, and you don't have the luxury of a peer-reviewed study to consult before deciding if that shadow is a saber-toothed cat or just a funny-shaped rock. In that kind of environment, a brain that can quickly connect the dots, even if it occasionally connects dots that aren't really related, and jump to a life-preserving conclusion, better run, is going to have a distinct advantage over a brain that meticulously weighs every piece of evidence before acting.
So, your mind is, in a sense, adaptively rational. It's built for getting by, for making good enough decisions quickly, not necessarily for winning philosophical debates about the nature of reality. Some of those beliefs that seem a bit irrational today, they might just be echoes of ancient survival strategies. Your inner caveman still calling some of the shots, even when you're just trying to decide what to have for lunch. Now, let's consider the cost of being wrong. In the ancestral environment, some mistakes were, shall we say, more final than others. This is where error management theory comes in. It's a rather insightful idea, suggesting that if the cost of one type of error is much higher than the cost of another, your mind will evolve a bias to make the less costly error, even if it means making more errors overall. Think about it. Failing to detect a predator when it's actually there, that's a very high-cost error. You become lunch. On the other hand, thinking a predator is there when it's just the wind in the grass, the cost is minimal, a bit of fright, maybe you run for a bit. So, evolution would likely favor a brain that's a little jumpy, a little prone to seeing danger even when it's not there. Better safe than, well, you know, extinct. This better safe than sorry principle likely shaped many of your inherent belief-forming tendencies. A bias towards being wary of strangers, a quickness to assume harmful intent from ambiguous social cues, even a tendency to believe in unseen forces that might need appeasing. All of these could have served a protective function, minimizing the risk of truly catastrophic mistakes in a world full of uncertainties.
And so, our little expedition into the architecture of human belief finds itself, as all such inquiries must, at a pause rather than a full stop. We've wandered through the mind's internal workshops where convictions are forged in the heat of early experience and emotion, and then defended with a rather impressive array of psychological shields and rationalizing swords. We've seen how these beliefs are rarely solitary affairs, but are instead woven into the very fabric of your societies, passed down through stories, amplified in your tribes, and worn as badges of identity. We've tiptoed through the philosopher's labyrinth, observing the earnest, if sometimes circular, quest to define truth and justification, a quest often driven as much by the human heart's yearning for meaning as by the mind's desire for logical clarity. And we've peered back into the deep mists of your devolutionary past, considering how the very engines of your belief might have been engineered not for perfect accuracy, but for pragmatic survival in a world that rarely offered the luxury of complete information. What emerges is not a simple blueprint, but a wonderfully complex, sometimes contradictory, and endlessly fascinating tapestry. Human conviction, it seems, is a rich weave of reason, or what passes for it, powerful emotional currents, the deep need for social connection, and the ancient echoes of survival imperatives. It's a system designed less for passively reflecting an objective reality and more for actively constructing a reality that is livable, meaningful, and socially coherent, even if it's occasionally built on some rather wobbly foundations. To observe all this isn't to mock or to dismiss, far from it. It's to marvel at the sheer intricacy of it all, at the human mind's astonishing capacity to create order from chaos, to find patterns, real or imagined, to build worlds from words and feelings.
The tenacity of your beliefs, their resistance to easy revision, isn't just stubbornness. It's a testament to how deeply these convictions are integrated into your psychology, your societies, your very sense of self. So, if your beliefs are the lenses through which you view the world, the tools with which you build your understanding, it's perhaps worth asking from time to time, who ground these lenses? What ancient hands first shaped these tools? And when you look through them, what image of the universe and of yourselves truly comes into focus? The inquiry, as it always does, continues, and the human capacity to believe, to hold fast to ideas with such passion and persistence, despite all the evidence of belief's inherent subjectivity and its often tenuous grasp on certainty, well, that remains one of the most defining, perplexing, and, if I'm honest, one of the most consistently entertaining characteristics of your species. A subject always worthy of another long, patient, and, occasionally, a wryly amused observation.